Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Anna Mueller, and I'm an associate professor of history at UM-Dearborn. And I have the enormous pleasure to welcome you all to Take Back the Night, an event for survivors, supporters of survivors, and all those who seek to put an end to sexual assault and domestic violence. This year, I have a great honor to be the director of WILL, the Women in Learning and Leadership, an organization that gathers students of UM-Dearborn who are committed to fostering engagement on campus and in the greater Metro Detroit area. And it is in this capacity, as the director of WILL, one of the organizations that made this event possible, that I would like to welcome you all. I am wearing black on purpose. Women from my home country, Poland, have been on continued strikes since last Friday. They marched, protest, and sing in the thousands on the streets of big cities and small villages all over the country, protesting the political decisions that objectifies them. These women are demanding their voices be heard, and they are being led and organized by young, newly emerging leaders as the Women in WILL. While thinking about my friends, neighbors, family members, and colleagues in Poland, I would like to invite you all to start this event by watching a short presentation of WILL and our mission statement in the form of a video that consists of recordings from some of our WILL members. The mission statement was written by a student from WILL named Sara Khalifa. And now how I share. Just please deal with me for a second. Of course, I'm having issues here. Share screen. Okay.
I raise up my voice, not so that I shout, but so that those without voices can be heard.
We cannot all succeed when half of us are held back.
Malala Yousafzai, an amazing young activist for female education and empowerment,
who was among the many women fighting a centuries-old fight.
Women make up more than 50% of the population, yet are underrepresented in every society.
As we start a new decade, we must continue the work of women who preceded us,
such as Bell Hooks,
Fannie Lou Hamer,
Zaina Anwar,
Betty Friedan,
Gloria Steinem,
Angela Davis,
Billie Jean King,
Audre Lorde, and many more.
We are the Women in Learning and Leadership.
And we are asking you to join us in the fight for our rights.
The right to receive an education equal to that of a man.
The right to be judged by our character rather than our sex.
The right to live in a society that sees us as strong and empowered, not weak and fragile.
Join us in the fight for equal respect.
Equal challenges, equal opportunities.
Our attempts to level the playing field
and shatter the glass ceiling will ensure that our names are not forgotten
as the Women in Learning and Leadership.
Before I pass the virtual mic to Hanya Khan, our amazing, resourceful, and tireless WILL chair, I would like to thank everyone who has supported us throughout our preparations. Faculty and staff of the Gender Studies Department at UM-Dearborn, former WILL directors, Susan Getter of Castle, the Center for Social Justice and Inclusion, and Counseling and Psychological Services. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. We reached out, and here I would like to give a big shout out to Penny Kane for the initiative, and received words of support and encouragement from politicians, such as Governor Gretchen Whitmer. So I'd like to share her words with you, but before I do it, once again, thank you all for being here with us. And now I will see whether I am actually capable of sharing my screen again.
Hello, everyone. This is Governor Gretchen Whitmer. I wanted to take a moment to wish the University of Michigan-Dearborn's Women in Learning and Leadership the best of luck with your Take Back the Night event tonight. Take Back the Night brings essential awareness to sexual assault and domestic violence on college campuses. And I am proud to see young leaders like all of you taking the initiative to create and spread awareness about this important issue. We know that even in the middle of a pandemic, sexual assault can happen anywhere and at any time. That's why we're spreading awareness about and taking action to prevent sexual assault and domestic violence. And it's so important. I'm proud to see you taking the lead and helping to create an environment and community where sexual assault and domestic violence is simply not tolerated. So thank you and stay safe. Hello, everyone. This is Governor Gretchen Whitmer.
Hi, everyone.
So now I'm passing my virtual mic to Hanya.
Thank you, Professor Mueller. Hi, everyone. My name is Hanya Khan, and I am here on behalf of the amazing women in Women in Learning and Leadership, without whom none of this event could have been possible. So I'd like to give a massive shout out to them. I want to begin by saying that Take Back the Night is clearly held differently this year. Every year we hold this event with a march, a rally, commemoration for all the survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence. This year, we are still committed to doing the same thing. And for that reason, we have created a submission box so that those who are in support of survivors and survivors as well can give their voices and lend out their experiences or their advice to anyone who may be willing to listen. So Will has taken the initiative to create a new website this year, and this website, which I will send in the chat box shortly, features information about our program, Women in Learning and Leadership, features information about Take Back the Night, statistics for sexual assault and domestic violence, and resources for survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence, and then lastly, the submissions page. So in order to access this submission page, you will need to use either a Google form, which we have created, which allows for complete anonymous submissions, or to DM us through our Instagram or Twitter DMs, and we will once again anonymously upload your submissions onto our website. I also want to say that our event tonight will be composed of 3 different panels. We have 6 wonderful speakers today, and these speakers will be categorized into 3 panels. Those 3 panels will be about an introductory panel, one for survivor advocates, and then a legal panel. But before we begin those panels, I'd like to give a note of appreciation for the Center of Social Justice and Inclusion, as well as CAPS for collaborating with us for Take Back the Night. So go ahead, Center of Social Justice and Inclusion.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, everyone in attendance tonight. Again, my name is Sharia Carter, Director of the Center for Social Justice and Inclusion. And I also just want to thank Will for your incredible leadership and for CAPS for being here in this partnership with us and raising awareness on domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking. I am grateful that we are still able to continue such an important program like Take Back the Night in a remote setting. Thank you to the campus community organizations, the campus community, and to the brave victims and survivors who continue to show courage every day. I will now turn it over to Joelle and Krista, representing our Counseling and Psychological Services Office.
Hello all, my name is Krista Razovich. I'm one of the social work trainees over at Counseling and Psychological Services, otherwise known as CAPS. We just wanted to share a bit of general contact information and explain a little bit about what we do this evening. As you can see on the right side of the screen, there is a QR code that will lead you directly to our website. For anyone that has a smartphone, you can simply open the camera Point it at the QR code, hold your finger down over it, and the little link will pop down at the top. At the CAPS website, it shows you our core values, our statements of commitment, as well as general information on how to make an appointment with us. General contact information for us can be reached by phone at 313-593-5430, or our email, which is umdearborncaps@umich.edu. Normal hours of operation for us are Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And general services that we cover include individual and group counseling.
Thank you for that, Krista. Good evening, everyone. My name is Joelle Frangi, and I am a doctoral trainee with the CAPS office on clinical psychology. So leaving off where Krista so graciously led us here, so we do also have drop-in hours at CAPS. So that's if you're needing immediate services, immediate support. We do have that every weekday at 3 p.m. until 4 p.m. So again, that's every weekday, Monday through Friday. And we've provided the Zoom link here, which is also on our website. So check our website out. There's a lot of information there. And just for anyone who was curious, we are providing all of our services through the Blue Jeans app. So, you know, this pandemic is not stopping us. We are open. We are going forward strong. We talk to students who, you know, if they need a private space, people go to bathrooms, cars. So we can make it work if you're needing support, okay? We also have our after hours crisis line, which is this phone number here. You'll see at the bottom of the screen, 1-855-275-1715. And that would of course be for the hours outside of our normal hours of operation. And just to inform everyone, we do have a variety of clinicians at our CAPS office. So we have licensed psychologists, we have social workers, we have graduate trainees. So come see us if you're needing support. You can go ahead and check out our staff on our website as well. So again, lots of good information there. And I just want to let everyone know that we are committed to supporting our students, and we're happy to be partnering with this event tonight. So thank you everyone for hearing us out and having us here tonight. So right now in just a moment, I'll be sharing a Zoom link in the chat box. And this Zoom link is because we thought it would be important to have a support room available for anyone who's feeling like they could use some additional support tonight. This can be you know, sexual assault and domestic violence can be an emotionally charged topic. So we are ready to support you. We have counselors and we have a peer mentor in there as well. So come see us if you're feeling like that would be helpful for you. With that being said, thank you so much. And I will hand the virtual mic over.
Thank you to both the Center for Social Justice and Inclusion, as well as CAPS for your support. Again, I just want to echo that these psychological services can easily be attained at any point throughout our event. So please don't hesitate to reach out to any of the representatives. Once again, the chat box feature shows you the Zoom meeting, which you can use to go to a specific support room so that you can talk to one of our representatives. So as I mentioned before, for tonight's event, we have 3 panels and we have 6 speakers. These wonderful speakers are going to be enlightening us on the realities of sexual assault and domestic violence from their own respective fields of experience. So we will begin with the introductory panel, which will provide us an interview of what sexual assault and domestic violence is. Our first speaker of the night is Campbell Fox, who will be leading our introductory panel. So Kai is a representative of the nonprofit organization Haven. Haven helps survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault and also plays a large role in community education of these issues. Kai is a prevention education specialist and plays a large role in facilitating programs for young men. He believes strongly in the power of knowledge, community action, and positive leadership in ending violence, and he is particularly dedicated to engaging men in this prevention effort. Kai is also a student at the University of Michigan-Dearborn, and he is currently pursuing an MA in community-based education. Take it away, Kai.
Thank you. So The first thing that I'm going to talk with you all about is just to let you know a little more about Haven, the organization that I'm here tonight representing. Haven is Oakland County Center for the Treatment and Prevention of Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault. I say we are Oakland County Center because that's where we're located, but we've served survivors from out of county, out of state, even out of country, right? So I want to say that our services are for everyone. And that includes survivors, it includes support systems, it includes system people such as, healthcare professionals, law enforcement professionals, folks who need to know more about intimate partner violence and sexual assault. And I'm going to give you a quick rundown of all the services we offer. Right? So the first thing we have is our confidential crisis and support line, which is the gateway to all of our services. Right? So if any of these services are something that you or someone in your life might need, you can access them by calling this crisis and support line or using the crisis chat on our website. It is a 24/7 crisis line, so it's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It never closes. Right? And the online chat version is available from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Friday. I will put the information for that in the chat when I'm not speaking. So like I said, it's a confidential crisis line and folks can call it for any number of reasons, right? Whether it's to learn more about Haven services, to learn more about how to support a friend, or any other reason related to domestic violence and sexual assault. Okay. We also have a residential shelter, which is for anyone who is in immediate danger from an intimate partner. They can bring their children, they can even bring their pets, because we know that pets can experience domestic violence too, and they can be used as a tool or a tactic against a survivor, right? So we opened our pet shelter a few years ago as one way to reduce the barriers that folks face when they're leaving an intimate partner violence situation. We also offer counseling program. Our counseling services are for anyone ages 5 and up, and that includes survivors of intimate partner violence or domestic violence, sexual assault, child witnesses to intimate partner violence in the home, and also adult survivors of child sexual abuse. We also offer our social action team or court advocacy program, which can help folks navigate the court process and also help people get personal protection orders, sometimes better known as restraining orders. We can help people with those as well. We also offer a program called START, which is our Safe Therapeutic Assault Response Team, which is a team of forensic nurses and advocates who can treat injuries and collect evidence after a sexual assault has occurred. In case folks don't already know, that evidence does have to be collected within 5 days or 120 hours if somebody wants to submit it to a court of law. Okay. But folks do not have to submit those kits as long as somebody is age 12 and over, because the law is different for younger children. We will never force somebody to release their kit. We'll just hold on to it. And then if somewhere down the road, somebody does want to move forward with that, we will have that kit for them. Okay. We also offer comprehensive strangulation exams in the context of intimate partner violence, because we know that's one of the most lethal forms of intimate partner violence. So all of those services I just listed are completely free. We don't bill insurance, we don't charge anybody. We offer them completely free to our clients because we want people to be able to access those services. We also offer a community partnership program to help reduce the barriers that folks face when they're dealing with intimate partner violence or sexual assault. The last thing we do is prevention education, which is what I do. And we talk to students as young as preschool all the way up through university. We also do professional training such as for healthcare, law enforcement, other folks in the community awareness events, et cetera. So again, you can access any of those services by calling our crisis and support line or using our crisis chat on our website. The wonderful folks at Will have asked me to speak a little bit today on the questions of what is intimate partner violence, what is sexual assault, how do we define those things? So at Haven, we define intimate partner violence as a pattern of controlling and assaultive behaviors and tactics used by one partner to gain and maintain power and control over the other. I know that's a really wordy definition, but there are two things that I always tell folks that I want to highlight about that. Right? One is that it's a pattern, right? So we're talking about things that have been happening again and again. They might look different on different days, but that it's a pattern. And the other is that it's rooted in that power and control. Right? I hear myths from folks all day long about what our society thinks intimate partner violence is. Right? I hear people blame it on mental health disorders or intoxication, but those are excuses. And that the real root cause is that power and control. That one person wants what they want when they want it, and they don't care if they have to do harm to someone else in order to get it. We're also talking today about sexual assault. And at Haven, we define that as any contact of a sexual nature without voluntary consent. This can include unwanted contact with sexual body parts, as well as any other contact that's sexual in nature. And I also want to talk a little bit about some of the stereotypes we might face, right? That I hear folks say, this happens in that other neighborhood. But what we know is that intimate partner violence and sexual assault can happen to anyone. And it's not limited to one neighborhood, one community, one sexual orientation, one race, one ethnic group, one religious group. It can happen anywhere, right? And so by moving away from those stereotypes, we're able to better serve survivors and let folks know that we will believe them and that we will support them regardless of where they're coming from. There was also a question about how we recognize that we might find ourselves in the midst of a domestic violence situation. And so some of the things I want to mention about that is that it's important to look at the patterns of the relationship, that abuse is not just physical. There's a really great tool out there called the Power and Control Wheel that folks can look at that breaks down some of the different ways that abuse can show up, right? That it can also be financial, that it can be emotional, that it can involve threats and intimidation and isolation. So just because somebody might not have bruises or broken bones like they might in a movie does not mean they're not experiencing abuse. Right? The key question is, does one person have all of the power in that relationship? Does one person make the quote unquote relationship rules? Is one partner afraid of the other? Does one person feel like they can't leave, right? Those are all really big questions. And I strongly encourage that if someone is questioning their relationship, they think there might be something going on, that it could be abusive or even just unhealthy, that I encourage people to talk it through with someone on a crisis line, right? Only you know what your experience is like, but others can help you process in a safe and a confidential way in a form such as a crisis line or a crisis chat. Okay. I also want to talk a little bit about the stigma that is faced around sexual assault and domestic violence in the 21st century, right? And why that stigma still exists. And I would argue that based on the work that I do every day, that other folks at Haven do every day, is that we still live in a culture that supports gender-based violence, right? That normalizes things like rape jokes, that says things like boys will be boys, instead of holding people accountable, particularly boys, for any harm they might do to another person. Right? And we continue to hear all these cultural values, such as what happens in the home stays in the home. But when we continue to push beliefs like that on folks in the community, it makes it that much harder for survivors to come forward because they feel like they are, breaking these unwritten rules by coming forward. Right? And so we're continuing to stigmatize it every day. And that's really unfortunate because it makes it that much harder for survivors to get the healing and the help that they need. And it prevents accountability of the folks who are actually perpetrating that harm. Right? Which actually brings me to my next point, right? That as a society, we've created a culture of silence and shame around these topics, that we're afraid to talk about them. When I think about the sexual health curriculum, for example, that I grew up with at my school, we never talked about these things. There was too much stigma, too much shame, and that has to change, right? We have to be able to talk about this. That's why I work in education on these topics, because if we're not talking about them, then folks don't know that things aren't okay, that they don't know that they can get help, and they continue to be disempowered in their relationships. So we seek to empower survivors and give them options. All right, we're never going to tell survivor how to live their life. Right? I would argue too that again and again, what I hear in our society is that we teach people don't get raped instead of teaching people don't rape. And when we do that, we take the responsibility off of the perpetrator and put it on the person, the survivor. And that's a big part of that stigma, right? That we're teaching people not to experience violence instead of teaching people not to perpetrate violence. In a similar vein, when we're talking about intimate partner violence, the number one question I always get is, why does she stay, right? And although other folks can experience violence as well, most often what I hear is, why does she stay, right? And I get that question over and over, but what people should be asking is, why is that partner being abusive? Because that's the behavior that's a problem, right? So to break through these barriers, we need to change the questions that we ask, move away from those victim blaming statements, and start focusing on supporting survivors, believing all survivors, right? Not just survivors that fit our stereotypes, or survivors that are easy to like, that believing all survivors. And to offer those survivors the resources they need to heal, as well as holding perpetrators accountable, right? And always continuing to educate, right? So that as new generations are growing up, that they're able to move past some of those stereotypes that we see in here, and that they're able to debunk some of those myths that we hear about rape and sexual assault, that we hear about intimate partner violence or domestic violence, and that they're able to make that change for their generation. Okay. Thank you all for being here with me and giving me a chance to speak to you all. And I'm going to pass it back over to Hanya.
Okay, so that concludes our introductory panel. Thank you so much, Kai, for setting the framework and understanding sexual assault and domestic violence. I just want to echo one of the points that Kai brought up in understanding domestic violence in particular. I feel as if there's a lot of misinformation about that. So Kai brought up the power and control wheel. This is something that helped me a lot in understanding how there's so many different aspects to domestic violence and how it's not just physical. So if anyone would like to learn more information, I do suggest searching that control wheel up. So if you have any questions, then please leave them in the Q&A chat box, and we will get to those after all the speakers have presented. So at any point in the event, if you have questions, go ahead and drop it in there. So we will be moving on to the next panel, which is with survivors advocates, who will be explaining the experiences of survivors, and we will be starting with Morgan McCall. So Morgan was given a set of questions. Those questions include things to say to men and women who face sexual assault, what people should know about the role of power dynamics within assault, and how these sexual assault stigmas or events continue within COVID-19 and how COVID-19 may affect the acts of these violences. So Morgan is a student at the University of Michigan, and she is an advocate for sexual assault survivors. She currently works for Survivors Strong, which is a nonprofit that serves and honors survivors of gender-based violence. In her free time, Morgan has a penchant for strong coffee, modern art, and archaeological fieldwork.
Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you to everyone who coordinated this event. Thank you to everyone who contributed and will contribute their perspectives tonight. And thank you to everyone joining us in this virtual room. I have spoken at a few different Take Back the Night events in my day, most often here in the state of Michigan on college campuses. And I say pretty much the same thing every single time. I'm genuinely so grateful that these events exist because they offer a pause for reflection and some time for some scheming and dreaming up opportunities for a better world and to do better by survivors. This world can be hostile towards survivors in so many ways, that these spaces that we carve out for support and community and meaningful conversations, whether they're convened for like 20 minutes or 2 hours, they are valuable beyond words. They allow us as survivors of something, anything, to let go of that which we carry alongside us to survive day to day. Sometimes it's a weight, sometimes it's a storm or a wall. And let me be clear, this stuff rarely fits into the narratives that have been constructed for literally ever. If I could magically share one message with every single survivor from the most vulnerable parts of my brain, which is a brain that has been traumatized and unapologetically survived, it would be that experiencing sexual assault and also other forms of gender-based violence is not your fault. It's also equally not your responsibility to feel or heal a certain way. Let me repeat, it is not your responsibility to yourself or to anyone else to feel or heal a certain way after experiencing something as serious and impactful as violence. The reason that I feel so passionately about shattering these expectations for survivors to fit a mold, whether they're coming from your community, your family, your school, your work, your partner or partners, your doctor, social or traditional forms of media, or the laws as written, tacitly or loudly, it is because these expectations do a disservice to our personal complexities. These expectations that I'm referring to are born from the stigmatization of survivors, which permeates recorded history, as well as the legacy of the American State Building Project. Speaking to this in particular because I'm here now and this is where I do my work, violence is embedded in the history of the US and has been used to oppress marginalized communities for centuries. And this included sexual and domestic violence, which we must not erase nor ignore. By creating these certain requirements, stereotypes, expectations for survivors of violence, our society, I believe, has found a way, and this is despite a wave of so-called anti-rape legislation in the late 90s, to determine which survivors are worthy of resources, care, protection, and therefore which humans are worthy of having bodily autonomy, safety, and agency. The anti-violence movement has come so far, and I am so indebted to the great survivor minds that came before me and greeted me during the moments in which I needed them most. And yet, oftentimes the mainstream movement and the mainstream resources available, often they're tied to the criminal legal industry, haven't been successful in addressing this particular issue. It is the cultural and historical legacy of violence that determines which survivors are ignored by existing systems, which survivors are criminalized, and which survivors are considered, to be so illustratively voices for the voiceless. This feels extra real to me right now in this moment because, and this is something that is difficult and very personal for me to talk about, legislation in this state is being largely determined without survivors' voices. And increasingly, legislation is crafted with a very specific group of survivors in mind. To get more personal, my case in particular spawned legislation which did cater very specifically to a small group of survivors, which had my particular experience at one point in my life, and that in many, many ways failed to address or meet the needs of way more people. And so I don't think we can legislate this problem away, but who we centers really matters, and it really matters right now in the state of Michigan. We can and need to break this cycle together. It cannot happen without inclusivity and the not so radical conclusion that everyone deserves to be believed and supported after experiencing violence, because violence has adverse effects on us all. We can hold nuance, we can hold complexity, and it's a process, but we can find ways to celebrate these things too. Survivors have skills that are worthy of respect. And survivors are resilient beyond any measure. And survivors have so many solutions to our most pressing questions as a community, as a country, and as a world. If there's anything I can leave y'all with tonight, I hope it's a reminder to recall those things, internalize them as zealously as the oppressive forces have tried to internalize shame and stigma within survivors, and to remind yourself of these things when stuff hits the fan. To borrow from the words of one of my closest friends and a fellow survivor advocate, we can and we will build a safer, softer world. And we need literally every single one of us to make it happen. Thank you so much for your time tonight. And I appreciate sharing this space and holding this space with all of you.
Thank you for your insight, Morgan. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I think one of the most difficult parts of talking about sexual assault and domestic violence is that we need survivors to be intimately vocal about what they have been through. And it's a really unfortunate aspect that we need in order to create change, but this also emphasizes how much we need to listen to them when they speak. And as Morgan said, this will then affect many things later on, such as a culture that we hold as well as legislation. So again, thank you, Morgan, for your words. Our next survivor advocate is Jennifer Zinay, and Jennifer is answering questions relating to domestic violence. And she was given the questions about what she would say to men and women who are struggling with domestic violence, how they can recognize themselves within a domestic violence situation, and then why there's still stigma in the 21st century around domestic violence and how COVID may have impacted the rates of domestic violence which are currently occurring. So Jennifer is a psychology student at Wichita State University, and she plans to attend U of M for social work in 2022. She is an advocate for the release of her mother, Luann Zinay, who has served over 30 years inside a Michigan state prison. Jennifer is also invested in restorative justice and life without parole sentencing through the Jenny Project. This project will eventually showcase accumulation of stories discussing the realities of life without parole and the healing works of restorative justice. And now off to Jennifer.
Thank you so much for having me here today. I feel truly honored to be amongst this group of individuals discussing a topic that, quite frankly, we shouldn't still have to be talking about in the 21st century. This is my first take back the night, and this is my second time speaking publicly about my experiences and the trauma that my family has experienced generationally now as a result of domestic violence and sexual assault. As I mentioned, my mother has been incarcerated for over 30 years in Michigan's only female prison, Huron Valley. And she is there as a result of domestic violence and lack of community support and understanding, and basically the same things that we're coming here to talk about today were existing in the 90s, and here we are 30 years later still fighting. So I'm so happy to be a part of this group and to finally open up some discussions, at least in my world, to come forward and talk about my experiences in the hopes that they will, effectively help others. So I made a few notes here because I'm not the best at public speaking, total amateur here. So with the questions that they asked, one of them was discussing stigmas around sexual assault and domestic violence and why that's still occurring in the 21st century. Gosh, so many reasons. I think first of all, we have to deal with the fact that survivors' experiences are questioned, and they're questioned every single day. Women, children, and even men being victimized by sexual abuse and domestic violence and not believed. And not only do people not believe them, but they discredit their stories. Abusers discredit them as well. Perhaps they can't fully recall what happened. They don't know individual little details. And that could also be another reason why they're discredited. But I think one of the things we really need to focus on is believing survivors. Why are we still saying, I think Kai brought this up as well, why do we still make the comment, why didn't she leave? When you've got a woman like my mother in a domestic violence situation, why didn't she leave? In fact, that's the one question that I have been asked for 3 decades now. But what we need to be asking, like what was mentioned already, is why is he abusing her? Why is he violent? Why is he acting like that? And why aren't others, standing up to stop him? Another thing I think we don't look at when it comes to the question of why do these women walk away is what exactly are they, walking away from? Not only are they walking away from the violence, obviously, but love, family, their physical home. In my mother's case, she was also walking away from her income. My parents had a store together, so for her to leave, to just up and go, she would have lost that financial security as well. And also her entire social community. I was raised within the Jehovah's Witness community, and within that religion, women and children are taught very, very early on to be 100% subservient to men. Whatever the elders in the congregation say goes first. Whatever your husband says is not to be questioned. So I think in some cases, women just really don't have the option to leave, and we don't put enough weight on that, onto what they're walking away from. But then you've got the flip side of the coin. What are they walking into? And in a lot of cases, uncertainty, fear, shame, financial issues, lack of finances and having that support that they had in the home initially. So there's just a lot of the stigmas that still need to be broke down, and a lot of the conversations that we need to discuss surrounding how we even approach domestic violence and sexual assault, and how we treat these victims, and how we treat the perpetrators, how we are giving them the benefit of the doubt in most cases. Statistics show that women are in the most dangerous situation immediately after leaving their abusers. They say that they have a 70% higher chance of being murdered after leaving, right in that immediate time frame after. So a lot of women, I think, don't have the ability to leave, and the community around them is not very supportive. In my case, that's what my mother went through. I was kidnapped several times. My mother had a PPO, we had a protection order, there was a divorce filed, and yet we were unable to get the support that we needed from the community, from our religious community, from our social community, from the police department, to provide us with the help that we needed in order to be safe. And it's very sad. It's very heartbreaking for me to realize that there are families in this situation every single day today. And as a whole, there's so much work that needs to be done. And especially in this time of COVID, I mean, we've got domestic violence and sexual assault percentages going through the roof during this quarantine time, women and children being stuck at home with their abusers in many cases, families going through situations where maybe they've had a lack of income due to COVID, out of work, which then puts that extra stress on the household, which I know is no excuse for domestic violence, but it's another reason why these perpetrators may go off the deep end. Let me see, what were some of the other questions? I think I might be getting off track here. How can we recognize ourselves in the midst of a domestic violence situation? I think one thing that we should be focusing on in terms of education is bringing back the power and control wheel, and showing that to our young girls, our young kids, our boys, teaching them early on the behaviors and the red flags to look out for, to make sure that you're not in a situation like this. Many people come from homes with generational trauma. Domestic violence has been rooted in the culture of their family for years. And so for those kids, how can they begin to understand how to overcome and how to break this cycle of abuse within their own lives, and to rise above it? So I think we really need to focus on the education aspect of it. Otherwise, we'll continue to have a culture that doesn't even recognize firsthand that they're being abused. I think for me, growing up in a Jehovah's Witness environment, I'm sure you're probably not very familiar with that religion, but let's say for an example, if you were sexually assaulted as a child in a Jehovah's Witness church, you would need 2 witnesses to come forward and say that they saw that behavior happen. If you're not able to provide those 2 witnesses, then you're immediately discredited and nobody believes you. So when you're in that religion as a wife and a mother, if you're being abused, you go to the elders, to the older men in the congregation, and you explain your situation, at which time you're discredited and you are told to pray about it. And I will never discredit the power of prayer, but when you're going home every night to an animal in your home that's threatening you, threatening to hurt you, threatening to burn the house down with you in it, threatening your children, your parents, where do you go? Where do you turn? And I think that education really is what's going to change that. I think that the younger generation just really needs to realize what we're up against and call it out as soon as we see it. Call it for what it is and not let it, slip through the cracks. Stop people from beginning to perpetrate this violence in our lives and in the lives of our family members. Let's see. One of the other questions was, how do we break these barriers? And how do we become more supportive and inclusive for survivors, especially in the era of COVID-19? I think this is a tough one. There's no simple answer to that question. And I don't believe that I have any more insight on that topic than anyone else in this room right now. It's true that it makes it harder for folks to get the help that they need during COVID. Maybe perhaps women are not comfortable going to shelters because they're worried about being in close contact with others, perhaps catching the virus, passing it on to their children. I'm sure that there's some mommy guilt involved with the safety of their kids upon leaving during a pandemic. And I think also we need to discuss right now that many women, and especially women of color and immigrant women, don't feel comfortable calling law enforcement. They may not feel like, they're going to be believed. They may be discredited, even more so. And they may be afraid of being arrested and treated unfairly, which quite frankly, that's the sad world that we live in, is that fear has to exist. I wish that I had more insight on how to help during COVID. I'm so blessed that we have so many organizations out there that have hotlines. And now I hear that the CAPS program has an online drop-in hour every day from 3 to 4. That's very, very helpful. I think we need more organizations to offer counseling services and things that we can do remotely and especially discreetly. So I believe that events like Take Back the Night are so very important because it's helping bring this to the forefront. We are connecting, networking, able to share these resources, share the educational resources that are out there. And hopefully as a group, we can come together and to make some changes. I know that legislative action is necessary. Bringing civil suits up on behalf of survivors is also necessary to help bring more awareness to the situation and to how urgent this need is. And then here we are in the midst of an election coming up. So voting out people who fail to understand justice is another avenue that can definitely lead to making more fair, just world for our survivors. So with that, I'd like to just thank the organizers for inviting me and to say to all of you to keep up the good fight. Changes only happen if survivors take this action, and I'm very blessed to be a part of this group and to now maybe network with all of you on how we can move forward in the future and collectively make some change. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Jennifer, for sharing the story of your mother and for explaining the reality of domestic violence and how many times when people try to discuss it, they end up minimizing the harm that domestic violence causes by discussing things such as why a victim might stay. And also thank you, Jennifer, for emphasizing how there are so many resources that are necessary for survivors to leave, and that support systems are so crucial in their transition to a nonviolent state. So we will now be moving on to the final panel as we have finished the Survivors Advocates panel. And this panel is going to be discussing the legal aspect of violence. So our first speaker for this panel will be Marissa Cannon. The questions that Marissa has been given were asking about what more people should be aware of when it comes to male victims and the barriers they face from both the legal and social perspective, any correlations that have been seen between COVID and domestic violence or sexual assault, any legal advice, and any changes which may be needed in the legal system. So Marissa is an alumni of U of M, where she obtained her MSW, and she is currently a community response survivor at First Step, which is an organization similar to Haven in that it provides services for victims of sexual assault and domestic violence. Go ahead.
Unmute.
Sorry about that. I was just saying thank you so much for having me. It's really a privilege to be here. So thank you so much. So like Kenny was saying, my name is Marissa Cannon. I'm a member of First Step's community response team. And as a survivor advocate on the community response team, part of my job is to work with different police departments and courts within Wayne County. And so what I do is I'll review police reports, I'll reach out to survivors who are involved with the criminal justice system, and I'll kind of support them as they navigate their way throughout the court process. And I just want to preface our discussion today by letting you all know that I tend to use the term victim and survivor interchangeably. And this is just because as somebody who works collaboratively with the criminal justice system, I tend to use the terminology that the court and the police use. However, I recognize that not everybody who experiences these crimes is going to identify as a victim or as a survivor and vice versa. So today I was asked to talk about barriers for male survivors of domestic violence or sexual assault, what changes I would like to see happen, as well as the impact that I've seen within the pandemic on survivors. So I thought a great way to start would be to talk a little bit about COVID-19. And in particular, at First Step, we have not necessarily seen more cases of domestic violence or sexual assault because of COVID. However, we definitely have seen an escalation in cases that are already abusive or existing. And they're definitely getting a lot more intense. So for example, abusers are using a lot more lethal means to control their victims or their survivors, such as gun violence or strangulation. And survivors are being even more isolated due to the virus, which makes it even more difficult for them to be able to access our services. And we know that domestic violence is not necessarily caused by COVID-19. It's absolutely been used as another form of power and control. We've seen plenty of survivors who aren't able to leave or reach out for help because they've lost their jobs and are now financially dependent on their assailant, or they can't rely on the people that they used to rely on because of fear of getting sick or going out into the community. And so like I was saying, abusers take advantage of the survivor's fear of getting sick. We've seen abusers who will purposely try to get their survivor exposed to the virus or their children or their family. And if a survivor feels safe reaching out for help or contacting the police, that can be really difficult because the virus is a barrier. The criminal justice process is taking a lot longer. It already took a really long time, unfortunately, but due to COVID, things are getting a lot more backed up. And that can be really difficult and re-traumatizing to survivors because it takes them a lot longer to receive justice. But I also wanted to talk about today some of the positive changes I've seen since COVID-19 began, because it hasn't been all bad. We've seen some positive changes. The criminal justice system has been around for a long time and it's very slow changing. But because of COVID, getting a personal protection order, at least from my experience, has been a lot easier, or a restraining order, some people call it. In the past, survivors would have to drive down to the Coleman A. Young Center in Detroit and do the filing there. But because of COVID, PPOs can actually be submitted online and responses are typically seen within 24 to 48 hours. And additionally, most courts are holding their proceedings via Zoom, which is very interesting, but this also makes it a lot more accessible for survivors who, don't feel comfortable leaving their house, don't have access to transportation or childcare, and stuff like that. So I also have to talk a little bit about male survivors in the criminal justice system. So me personally, as an advocate, I don't see male victims as often. However, it absolutely happens. And I think it's really important to make sure male survivors know that their stories are valid and that they're being heard, and that most domestic violence or sexual assault service providers will also serve people of any gender, including First Step. And I think the reason I don't see male survivors in the criminal justice system as much has a lot to do with stigmatization and the social construct of what it means to be masculine or what it means to be a man. The age-old myth around domestic violence is that it only happens to women and children, and due to that, some men don't feel comfortable reaching out. They don't feel like the law enforcement will believe them or that law enforcement really will understand what's going on. And a lot of male victims I've noticed aren't really able to recognize that what's happening to them is domestic violence because it doesn't really fit into their mental schema of what they believe domestic violence is or looks like. And I've also seen a lot of male perpetrators who get law enforcement involved and use the law enforcement as a power and control tactic against the victim. So they'll try to frame the victim as the abuser and get them in trouble with the law. And that also makes it a lot more difficult for male survivors to get the services and the support that they need. I also want to note that some LGBTQ plus identifying clients may also be hesitant to press charges or get involved with the criminal justice process because they might not know that these policies and services are available to them. And there also could be the fear of having their sexuality used against them as a form of power and control, like being afraid of being outed when they're not ready and stuff like that. And lastly, I was asked to talk about what changes I think need to be made in the legal system, as well as provide any legal advice that I have. And I just want to preface this portion of our panel by saying that at First Step, we don't give advice. We're an empowerment-based agency. And what that means is that we're never going to tell anybody what to do or what they shouldn't do. We're just going to instead try to provide them with the information, resources, and support that they need to empower them to make their own decisions about what is best for them in their situation. That being said, though, if anybody is experiencing gender-based violence of any gender, I definitely recommend documenting everything that you can. While we know domestic violence isn't just physical and that it can happen in many ways, and there's not always marks or physical signs to show that this occurred. So keeping notes of incidents, taking pictures or video if you can be very beneficial when it comes to prosecution. But it's also important to keep in mind your own safety. So if keeping notes or taking pictures or videos is not a safe option, then it's probably not the best to do that. And I think it's also important to consider that it's not the safest option for everyone to get law enforcement involved. For many clients, especially our clients of color, getting law enforcement involved isn't a safe option. And so that's where, different support services and domestic violence agencies can really help because they can help with safety planning and other safe options when getting law enforcement or the criminal justice system involved isn't an option. And I think it's also important to remember that justice looks different for everybody. Some survivors want to see jail time and probation or just want the abuse to stop. And I think the most important thing is to just do some self-reflection, check in with yourself, try to figure out what's best for you and not what you were told to do as a survivor or by someone else. Because at the end of the day, it's important to remember that survivors are the experts of their own situation. And then as for changes I would like to see in the legal system, is that I would definitely like to see some more education for the various professions, such as judges, detectives, police officers, on the neurobiology of trauma specifically, as well as cultural humility, cultural competence, because what we know is that trauma, especially complex or repeated trauma, can actually alter our brains and the brain chemistry, how we think, the way we're going to process and remember information. And that's why victim survivors are not always going to remember the details of an assault. They might have their stories change. And unfortunately, a lot of court or law enforcement personnel will view trauma as the victim not being credible or the victim lying. And we know that that's not true. It's just because of the trauma. And I think that education on the trauma brain, as well as traumatic bonding, is really crucial in decreasing victim blaming, as well as increasing empathy, and hopefully leading to more prevention efforts in the future. And lastly, I just want to talk a little bit about First Step. So if any of you are survivors or know anyone who's a survivor of domestic violence or sexual assault, you're more than welcome to get in contact with us or anybody who's speaking today, I'm sure. We're more than happy to help you with safety planning, navigating the criminal justice system. We have counseling, whatever you need. We have advocates, including myself, who work directly in courts and police departments throughout Wayne County. We actually have an advocate who works directly in the Dearborn Police Department, who's really amazing. We have a children's and adults program, a 45-bed shelter, an animal shelter, and our 24-hour helpline, and also a newly established speakers bureau that can do engagements like this one. So if anybody is interested or has any questions, I will absolutely put our information in the chat box. So thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you, Marissa, for that understanding of the legal system, and also for emphasizing the fact that there have been positive changes during COVID for domestic violence survivors. I'm sure we're all glad to hear that, such as the Zoom court cases and the online PPO forums, and also for highlighting the stigma that male survivors may face and the social barriers that men and those of the LGBT community may face as well. So we are now down to the last portion of the panel and the concluding speakers before our question and answer session. So once again, if anyone has any questions that they would like to ask, please drop them within the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen. And now allow me to introduce Jasmine Rippey and Amina Sheikh, also known as the Ladies in Law. So these women have been provided the questions of whether they have seen any correlation between COVID and domestic violence or sexual assault, any legal advice they would have for victims of violence, and any changes which they believe need to be made within the legal system to provide more fair trials. So Jasmine and Amina are the co-founders of a minority woman-owned law firm that they founded in January 2019. Their Detroit law firm specializes in criminal defense, family law, probate, and estate planning. And prior to branching out on their own, Jasmine and Amina both worked at a large corporate firm based in downtown Detroit, but they built a unique law firm to represent their dynamic personalities after discovering that they did not fit into the traditional corporate setting. All right, ladies.
Thank you so much.
We're really happy to be here on this panel.
Yes, we so are, and we think it's a very critical and important panel. As mentioned, we do both criminal defense and family law, and by doing both of those, we see what the victim is dealing with as well as the accused. And both sides, there's a lot going on, but there's rarely truly, especially in a legal setting, voices for the victim. And so this panel and this discussion is so critical, especially at this time. Wouldn't you say, Jasmine?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So going to that, actually, why it's also so important is the first question we were asked was if we see any correlation between COVID and domestic violence or sexual assault. Now, I know the last speaker that hasn't seen so much of new cases, but we absolutely have. The number of domestic violence cases has certainly increased during this pandemic. People are dealing with a lot of stress, financial strains, losses of jobs, their homes, uncertainty, the feeling of helplessness. And now I feel like a lot of times when we walk into court, the docket is domestic violence, domestic violence,
The
DV case.
misdemeanors docket is heavily domestic violence cases.
Heavily. And so it's really natural that these financial and mental and emotional issues are just spilling over into personal relationships. And what a lot of people don't realize, and we've come to see as attorneys, is a lot of the relationships, they're not married for years with children and family. It's a lot of new relationships where individuals ended up having to be stuck with each other when they weren't prepared to do that, to be around each other 24/7. And that's really, really tough. So quarantine has definitely been a big change on all interpersonal relationships, and sadly has been resulted in a lot more of these domestic violence cases.
Yeah, and with everything being shut down, people who may have had some type of outlet to release stress or frustration couldn't get that out. So they may have ended up taking that out on their partner, and which is why it could be a reason why there are many more cases. I mean, we've seen people pick up 2 domestic violence cases back to back within a week of each other, which is just crazy. And this was all during the quarantine. So I'm assuming that it has something to do with that increased stress and really no outlet, no getaway. If you get in an argument with your partner and you're quarantining, like, where are you going to go to get away from that situation? And just in general, as criminal defense attorneys, we've seen overall violence increase during the pandemic. There's been a lot more gun violence cases, a ton of more shootings. I know the Detroit police had to get assistance from the feds. In celebrity news, I'm not sure if you guys know Megan Thee Stallion. She's a popular rapper. She was shot by another rapper who was supposedly her boyfriend, and this happened back in July. So I mean, these issues have touched everybody. It's not just limited to regular people.
Yeah. So, and that goes into, okay, what a lot of people don't understand, and it's frustrating to us because we want people to understand this, and that's why we're so happy we get to speak about it. But what legal advice to give victims of violence? The victims rarely know what's even going on, and it's very confusing. They're already victims, and on top of it, they're thrown into this court system, and prosecutors are very, very busy. They have an enormous caseload, and so it's not like they give that personal one-on-one attention to the victim so that they can learn and understand what's going on.
And somebody may end up being a victim of domestic violence and not even realizing that act actually qualified as domestic violence under the law, which Amina's going to get into right now.
So the legal standards for domestic violence and sexual assault, so that a victim can understand what it means under the law. Domestic violence actually doesn't require physical touch, physical harm. People think domestic violence is bruises, cuts, the physical scene.
Yeah, you don't have to have any physical injuries.
Under the law, you don't. It can be as simple as something being thrown at you, but it misses you. That's an assault, and that's part of domestic violence. It can be feeling like someone's going to punch, but they just punch towards you.
But don't actually
do it. And so a lot of domestic violence victims think, well, I didn't get hit.
Or
So
I don't have any injuries. Nobody's going to believe me.
Yeah, so I shouldn't call. That's not how the law actually looks at it. But on the other hand, when it comes to sexual assault, it's more straightforward. There has to have been some kind of unconsented sexual conduct, not actually penetration, but sexual conduct. So for both, most of the time, the victim and abuser are the only 2 witnesses involved. So it really boils down to one person's word against the other, and whatever supporting physical evidence they may have, like photos or text messages of what happened, or maybe a mark on the wall where they had been standing. So yeah, that's that legal standard with that.
Okay, so now I'm going to talk about what to actually do if you've been a victim of domestic violence and what can help you under the law. So first things first, obviously you want to call the police as soon as possible if you can. I know some people may end up waiting several days, and it's not to say that the perpetrator can't be charged or convicted, but it just kind of gives the defense attorney another hole to stick at, like, okay, well, if you were really injured, if this really happened, why didn't you call the police when it happened? So you don't want to give the other side anything to work with. In addition, like Amina was talking about with evidence, you want to preserve evidence. So you want to take photos, you want to keep records, you want to save threatening text messages. All of this is evidence that can ultimately help your case, because typically domestic violence is one person's word against the other. Who
Right.
seems more credible? But if you have any evidence to support your position, that's going to make you have a much stronger case.
And not just evidence from that specific instance. I mean, a judge or a jury is going to look at all the evidence that you have, like there's been abuse going on for a long time through text messages. So it doesn't have to just be that
it doesn't have to
specific
be
time.
Yeah, with domestic violence is one of the unique cases where prosecutors are allowed to present previous acts and old text messages, and even prior convictions of domestic violence can be used against someone. Typically, all this stuff is inadmissible, but they've made these special provisions because they understand the sensitive nature of domestic violence charges. Now, another thing that's very important to do, as the other speaker prior to us touched on, I can't remember her name, I'm sorry, but getting a restraining order, a PPL, that is critical. It's very helpful because especially now, as she was saying, you don't have to go down to the courthouse. You can submit them online and get them very quickly, and they're going to help create more evidence for your case. And it's very critical, as we see in criminal cases and with family law. Having that PPO gives you a lot of leverage in a divorce case and a child custody case if you're concerned with your children being around the abuser.
Yes.
Now, there are 3 types of PPOs that you can seek. The first is for domestic relationships. So you have to be in some type of domestic relationship with the abuser, and you have to show that the abuser is likely to assault, threaten, harass, or stalk you. So you have to show that there's that kind of threat. It doesn't have to be like, oh, it's going to happen, but it kind of, you have to show the judge that something is likely to happen. Now, you can't say, oh, the last time something happened was a year ago. The judge is going to be like, well, there's no real threat right now if nothing has happened in the past year. So you want to act on that quickly after something happens. The other type is a non-domestic PPO, and it really protects you from stalking or harassing behavior if you're not in some type of domestic relationship with a person. There have to have been at least 2 incidents of harassment, which can include following you, unwanted calls, texts showing up at your job. Cyber stalking is electronic stalking. An abuser posts messages about you, sends you messages through the internet and any other electronic means that's included. And the third type is a non-domestic sexual assault. So this is for all sexual assaults outside of your domestic relationship partner, and it protects someone who has sexually assaulted you or even threatened to sexually assault you when you don't have that domestic relationship. And for girls who are under 18, sexual assault includes someone providing obscene material. So it doesn't have to be necessarily touching, which I thought was interesting. So in order to get a PPO, you do have to file a petition with the circuit court in the county that you live in. The forms are available online. You can do a Google search. They're pretty straightforward. And you can also submit that evidence that I discussed, the pictures, the text messages, whatever supporting documentation. The judge will review everything and enter the PPO if you meet that standard. We are able to help with PPOs if anybody needs assistance with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people, talking about that legal advice, it's a lot more encompassing for a lot of situations than a victim doesn't think would be available to have a legal fix to some things. It's better to try than to not. And the law does allow for that. Okay, so when someone is criminally charged with domestic violence or sexual assault, the judge always issues a separate no contact order where the abuser cannot have any type of contact with the victim. Okay. And that is so important. So important. The issue we see as attorneys is that a lot of times the victim ends up still contacting the abuser because
while there's no contact
while the no
orders in
contacts are
place.
going. But that's it happens a lot in these type of relationships. The abuser has abused them so much, the victim feels that they need to. But the problem is legally, it really can hurt the case because the defense attorney can sit there and go, well, he or she, the victim, keeps reaching out to the so-called abuser. There must not be that much abuse going on. And the court isn't going to delve into their whole relationship and this
the whole
and that.
psychological history and everything.
The court doesn't have time. It's not part of the law. And the defense attorney can just say that. It really also hurts just the victim's credibility. And the defense attorney is always going to bring up those things. So you got to remember that these cases are really he said, she said, the victim's word against the abuser's word, the accused word. And you're hurting yourself by changing what your story is by seemingly being okay being in contact with them. And also remember, a victim, you need to protect yourself too. And that's why that no contact order is there. Another thing that needs to be noted that's super important for victims to understand is that when you go to court, remain calm, remain collected when you're explaining what happens. Your demeanor is going to speak so much to your overall credibility. And in these cases, credibility is critical. And being calm, many times, of course, a victim is going to feel emotional.
Yeah, it's okay to cry.
It's okay to cry, but being hysterical, being just over animated, different things.
Or being confrontational
Yeah,
with
angry.
the defense attorney.
It's not going to help. And it's not going to help yourself either. But a judge doesn't know you, doesn't know everything, and needs to get the story and understand what's going on. So, for example, when a criminal defense attorney is cross-examining you, if you have to testify as a victim, they will try to confuse you, get you all riled up because that's going to hurt your credibility. That's their job. Don't just recognize that that is the criminal defense attorney's job, okay?
It doesn't mean that they are trying to discredit you.
No.
And, as lawyers, we have a duty to build the best case and advocate for our clients in any way that we can.
Right. And a lot of times also what the defense attorney is going to do is try to trip you up and be like, what about this? What about this? And you may not remember everything perfectly. That's okay. You just say that, honestly, I don't remember. Don't try to create an answer that you don't have an answer to, because the attorney is trained to trip you up then. And then again, your credibility gets shot. And the less credible you are, the less likely that the accused, who, if they really did it, is going to actually be found guilty.
Right.
So
now we'll talk about some changes that we feel are needed in the legal system so that there can be a better, fair trial for both the accusers and the accused. So starting with the accused, there's obviously, I'm sure you guys are aware of this, a whole host of issues with the criminal legal system for defendants, but it really starts with the prosecutors, because in Michigan, they hold the keys. The prosecutors are the ones that bring forth the charges. Some other states have a whole grand jury process where there's a hearing similar to what jurors would hear and come to a decision. But here in Michigan, the prosecutor has all the authority. And with that, prosecutors are able to use that authority to treat people in different ways. So the prosecutors' biases come into their decisions when they're deciding whether or not to prosecute someone, whether or not to offer someone this type of deal. So we think starting out, as far as helping to get rid of some of this implicit bias, especially in these type of domestic violence cases where a prosecutor may never have been a victim of domestic violence, so they don't really understand the case and really don't understand how much it impacts someone's life moving forward. They may be just, oh, I just want to get this case off my docket. Come on, you want to accept, are you okay with them taking this plea, just to kind of move things along? So we think that reducing this type of implicit bias or insensitivity is very important. We think that prosecutors should be trained, especially with domestic violence, maybe have special domestic violence, sexual assault prosecutors that only deal with these cases, that understand and the advancements and things that are going on with that, and understand all of the nuances, the psychological issues that these victims are dealing with. and on the flip side, when it comes to the accused, defendants a lot of times lack the resources to get an attorney to properly defend them. So they're stuck with these public defenders who may have hundreds of cases on their hundreds of cases that they're working with, and that won't take the time to do the research, come up with a solid defense, ask the questions that need to be asked to make sure that this person has a fair trial. So on that side, we think that defense attorneys should, well, public defenders should get more money. Their pay is just like horrible. I know Michigan has been making efforts on paying public defenders more money, which is good. Some people are even getting paid by the hour, but a lot of public defenders, they only get paid for the work that they do when they show up to court. So how much work do you really think they're going to do outside of court if they're not getting paid for it, and they're getting paid nominal amounts of money for each case? They have to make a living for themselves. So that significantly hurts someone's defense and ability to have a fair trial.
Absolutely. And that's what's going on with the accused. But we firmly believe there's a lot of changes that need to be made within the legal system for the accuser, the victims, okay, to benefit them. And we actually currently have a case, and this is really rare, but we actually represent the victim specifically. The prosecutor is doing their own thing, the criminal defense attorney is doing their own thing, but the victim actually asked us to represent her because she didn't feel her voice was being heard. She didn't feel like what her opinion was being heard at all. See, the thing is, prosecutors should place the victim at the forefront of their decisions, especially in domestic violence cases, rather than being directed by their other considerations. We're talking media, the public pressure, prosecutors seeking a big win because it's personal gratification or it's going to boost their career. And this case that we have taken on actually exemplifies all those issues. We have our client who doesn't want this case to keep going, wants it wrapped up as soon as possible. She got thrown in the media. It was a big media. She almost was literally beaten to death. And her significant other who did it was a well-known bodybuilder. She didn't want her face plastered all over media outlets, how it got out there, the court allowing this, all these different things. And she felt like she was suffocating. This case started 3 years ago and it's still going on. Still hasn't even, the trial date keeps getting pushed back. So we see how critical it is that there's some sort of change made so that the victim maybe has their own representation in these types of cases. And it's just not known so much. I mean, our client just wants to move on from the case, heal from it, but she's been forced to relive this traumatic experience over and over. And we're not talking just a couple times here and there. I mean, there was at one point, almost every other week, a court hearing, and she has to go to these. But yet the prosecutor keeps insisting on moving forward rather than taking the victim's opinion and thoughts and desires and needs into consideration so that the case can get hurried up, rather than say, nope, we're not going to give a plea deal that the defendant may accept. Instead, we're just going to take this to trial. What, now she has to go testify in trial? There's going to be reporters. Even with Zoom, it's recorded and put over anywhere in media outlets. So we are really hoping, and there was a video involved in this case of the attack, and it got portrayed.
It was leaked to the media. So, I mean, she just had to constantly relive this pain over and over again.
Right. So, I mean, I think we see as being, we're never actually asked by somebody, can you represent me? She was gutsy enough to do that and knew, self-aware enough that she needed that. And it has helped her tremendously to have us just represent her. More and more victims need really their own personal representation, because although prosecutors, it is supposed to be at the forefront of their decision-making, it's very rare that that happens, because maybe it's simple as, I have a huge docket as a prosecutor and I'm exhausted and I'm swamped and I just don't have the time to be there for the victim. But if there was separate representation, that could really, really help. And that's what we're hoping and are doing with this particular case. And I think we would look to helping other victims if they want to hire a separate to do that, because it's really been an eye-opening experience. But I think that's all we have. Yeah,
that's all the time that we have.
That's all the time we have. So thank you so much. And of course, we welcome any questions anybody has.
Thank you so much, Jasmine and Amina, for teaching us about the legal hurdles in place for survivors, for helping us distinguish the difference, legally speaking, between domestic violence and sexual assault, and how I feel that many times we as a society and those who advocate for survivors want the definition legally of assault, whether it's domestic or sexual, to line up with the legal definition, and sometimes it doesn't always occur. So understanding these distinctions is an important aspect of contributing to the conversation about these forms of violence. And thank you for the legal advice that you provided as well. So now we have just a little while left of the event. So we are going to move on to the question and answer panel before wrapping up for the night. If I could ask all of the speakers to please turn on their videos and unmute their mics in a second. So we have collected questions from our audience throughout the night, and I'll present them out loud for any of the speakers to respond. So any of you are free to respond. And those of you who have questions, you can continue still sending in those questions in the chat box. So I will begin with one of our questions asks, why do you think victim blaming is so prevalent in our culture among men and even women? How can we help to reverse the victim blaming mentality?
Anybody can talk about this.
Is this yeah, go ahead.
Anybody, okay.
Yeah.
I think just as lawyers and women, and we're women of color too, so we've seen how that's also been impactful. It's a cultural thing, right? So, I've had certain people come and beat up, and yet they're trying to come to court because in their culture, you protect the male. Mm-hmm. That's just what is ingrained from a young age for them. I know in my household growing up, I'm half Pakistani, I'm Muslim, and I was raised where my father had the final say, and he was more liberal and pushing it to say, no, I want my daughters to. We've seen it as lawyers come, and I think that is what kind of creates these issues more. It's, we're a melting pot in this country. We have so many different cultures coming together, so many different areas in the entire US where people are raised in different ways. And I think that's a huge part of it. And being defense attorneys, sometimes it blows my mind who I'll see supporting the most horrific cases, but the woman comes in and says, no, because that's how it is. That's how it would be in the country they came from. So I think that plays a large role.
Do you also want to touch base on how we can help to reverse the victim blaming mentality?
I think things like this, what's happening right now. Definitely. And a large part of what Jasmine and I as ladies in law try to do is we try to educate. Most lawyers don't, it's just part of the legal society. Like, no, we're lawyers. You got to come and pay us and have us represent you and sign that retainer before we're going to give you that knowledge. Victims aren't going to do that. Right. So we try to break down those barriers. We have like a YouTube series, an Instagram series where we provide weekly videos on various topics. And so for that knowledge, it's going to enable.
So yeah, it empowers them to understand what is domestic violence and, when to call the police. But other than that, I think that using our platform to bring people on there who want to share their story and other media outlets and platforms, just getting the perspective more so from the accused and understanding what they're going through psychologically, emotionally, spiritually.
The accuser. We say victim. We get accused.
Messing it up, but
we
yeah,
defendant and victim.
The victim, really seeing things from their angle and putting them at the spotlight.
Which I think as a whole society has begun doing more, but in a more powerful sense with that legal standard. Like, we want all victims, male or female, to truly understand the power they have and what's available to them, the resources available. And for, at least as lawyers, for us, the law isn't so intimidating. Let us help you out. So that knowledge will come back around.
Right.
Oh, thank you for that. Do any of the other speakers want to add anything or comment?
I can add a little bit. So as was mentioned in my introduction, I work a lot with young men. We run a young men's leadership program. So I spend a lot of time talking to young men. And one of the things we talk about a lot is the way that gender is constructed in our society. And we do an activity, we call it our gender box exercise, where we talk about the ways that society has constructed these boxes for men and women and expects them to fall into them. And when I do this exercise with them, I ask them, you know, for men who don't fit into this box, that aren't aggressive and, you know, that don't love sports and beer and all these things that we expect men to want to do, you know, what happens to them? And I always ask them, what words do those men get called? And, you know, I don't feel the need to repeat those words because they're not polite words. But I also don't think I have to, because I think we can probably all imagine what those words are. And there are two things that those words always refer to, right? They either refer to femininity, they're words that are meant to make the man seem feminine, you know, whether, or they're words that have to do with being a part of the LGBTQ plus community. And so the question that always brings up is, you know, if we're teaching men that the worst thing in the world to be is a woman or to be a part of the LGBTQ plus community, what are we teaching men, right? And so that those lessons start so young, because if you were to ask, even when we do our gender respect programs with the elementary kids, you know, you ask a 7-year-old boy, you know, like, what's the worst thing in the world to be called? And they'll tell you that the worst thing to be called is a girl, right? And so that learning starts so young. And that gender bias starts so young, that this is a conversation we have to be having definitely in these spaces, but also starting way earlier, right? You know, and the one other thing I'll say, right, obviously I'm a guy and I do not run the Young Women's Leadership programs, but I want to share something that my colleagues have shared with me, which is that a lot of times for young women, it's a protective measure, right? To distance yourself and say, that would never happen to me because I wouldn't do this and I wouldn't do that. And so I personally cannot speak to that experience, not being a woman, but that's something that my colleagues have shared with me, that a lot of young women experience, that, you know, it's too scary to think about the threats that exist in the world. And so it feels safer to make a distance there, even if that distance is not real.
Yeah, I just want to add something that I really agree with Kai's point about like how it might be a preventative measure, because when any tragedy happens, it's usually a shock factor that makes it such a big deal. So whether it's like a school shooting or whether it's an assault story or whatnot, it's like, oh, that's so surprising that happened. I can't believe that happened. And I think one of the things that we need to realize is that so many people go through these things, and that really adds to the topic that it's not about the victim. You know, if so many people are victims, then it can't be one defining factor of them all. And then I agree with what Amina and Jasmine also said about how we need to be having events such as these often and repetitively in order to change this kind of mindset. So another question is, how concerned, oh, this is interesting. How concerned are you panelists with the new Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett? What effect do you think she will have on our culture?
We are very concerned. Very, very concerned.
Especially with the way the court is now 6'3", conservative to liberal. It's
very concerned. Just as lawyers, I've read some of her opinions that come with some I've actually looked at, and if she is going to be consistent with how she has already been as a judge, it's not just for women or for female reproductive rights, it's for all minorities in many senses. Anybody that may be facing, everybody's, I mean, it, just as Jasmine said, the number of specific point of view justices versus other, it just, there's not a fair game in this anymore. And that's what our judicial system requires and needs. And there's a reason why she was pushed through so quickly.
Right.
And she seems like a very brilliant, intelligent woman, okay? But I'm just going off of her history of what has happened and her opinions in them. And after we've had a trailblazer such as Justice Ginsburg, it's alarming that it's like a full circle, and not in the way that as lawyers and women we would hope. So what needs to happen now is we need to keep voicing keep making action, keep empowering ourselves, keep having these sort of platforms, because it's going to be more of a battle than ever.
Anyone else like to comment on that question? All right, if not, what kind of support should you offer to a victim after their experience? How do you especially encourage them to take back autonomy over their lives, since many victims feel as if their power has been taken away from them?
I can talk a little bit about this one. I think when somebody comes forward to talk about something like domestic violence or sexual assault, we can be really quick to want to jump in and be a helper and say, okay, now you should do this, and then we can do this. And the reality is most victim survivors are traumatized. It takes a lot of time to be able to process what has happened. And so I think honestly, the best thing that you can do for somebody who has experienced domestic violence or sexual assault is just to take a step back and listen and ask them what they would like to do. Don't pry for information, just use empathetic listening and statements, and then help them and provide them with information for shelters or other services when they're ready, but never push them to do anything that they're not ready to do.
That's really insightful. Anyone else?
Sure, I can add. I agree with everything Marissa said. At Haven, there are 3 things that we tell folks to say when we're working with them to talk about how to support someone who's experienced this. The first thing to tell them is, I believe you, because in our culture, so often survivors aren't believed, and they may have been told by someone perpetrating violence against them that they won't be believed, right? And so by starting there, it builds trust, and it works away from some of what that perpetrator's been telling them, right? The second thing is, it's not your fault, right? Goes back to everything we've been saying, right? That our culture will tell survivors again and again that it's their fault. And so it's really important to expressly tell someone that it's not their fault, that they've experienced violence. And then the last thing is the same thing that Marissa said, that, what can I do to support you? You can offer options, let them know that services are out there, but not in a way that's going to pressure them, right? Just in a way that lets them know that if you want counseling, if you want to talk to someone, this is an option, and not to push them into that, right? A lot of times when I'm, again, speaking with young men, and they're like, oh, if this happened to my sister, I would go, I would kill a guy, I would do this, that, or the other thing. And we really encourage people to take a step back from their own emotions, because it's not really about them, right? It's really about survivor. It's really about what's going to be empowering for them. And recognizing too that being in that situation if you go out, and start picking a fight with somebody, it can potentially put that survivor at a risk for more harm. And so being really conscious of, how you're acting and behaving, being conscious of confidentiality needs and everything like that. So, but that's a really great question.
Thanks, Kai. Anyone else? All right, so why does the legal system re-victimize or fail survivors so often? I guess this question could also be posed as like, how does the legal system re-victimize or fail survivors?
Yeah. I mean, we touched on this before with our client having to constantly relive this traumatic incident over and over and over again for the past 3 years.
For prosecutorial gain, and the defense wanting, of course, the defense is going to do what the defense wants to do.
Yeah.
Okay, it's defense. But in this case in particular, it's opened my eyes to this prosecutorial gain from it, the media coverage from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we certainly think that prosecutors need to take a step back, take themselves out of it, put the victims at the forefront. And in this case, our client wants this to be done with. She just wants to move on and heal from it.
Yeah, and I think also being re-victimized, I guess so many of these cases are going on, and as Jasmine said, we think there should be actually prosecutors that specifically handle these cases. These prosecutors are handling the whole gamut, right? They will cut these plea deals constantly to just get the case off their docket, off their caseload. And what happens then, I see a lot of defendants be like, oh, I got this plea deal. they don't feel punished. A lot of these plea
Especially
deals.
there's a first time offender law where if someone pleads guilty and successfully completes their probation, it can be removed from their record. So it's as if there's really not much recourse for them moving forward.
Now, with that one, the victim is supposed to give permission for that to happen.
Sometimes prosecutors don't make them do that.
They don't. And the other thing you have to understand is a prosecutor reaching out and saying, hey, I'm supposed to represent you and what you've been through and help rectify it. But I really want this plea deal. This is probably a good plea deal. You know, I'm sure they'll get past it, but then the case will be done with. That's not actually helping the victim, and the victim's going to feel pressured, like, well, the prosecutor's telling me I should do this.
And the prosecutor's supposed to be representing my interests, then
I probably should be doing that. And in essence, it's actually re-victimizing them and not allowing them to heal, because there hasn't really, they don't probably feel a lot of justice. Now, some do, but it's, again, the way the legal system is set up and how much work these prosecutors are having to do just becomes another case. And every case is unique. These really are super traumatic, these type of cases.
Thank you for that. Again, would any other speakers like to comment on this question?
I also believe that the law enforcement, prosecutors, judges, juries, they don't have the education needed to understand the victimization dynamics and the tactics of the perpetrators. So until we get that knowledge widespread, I think we're going to continue to have these issues. And like the lawyers brought up as well, it's just another case. There's so many cases that how can we possibly take the time to look at each one individually unless we're having some type of comprehensive training for everyone involved.
I think too, with exactly what Jen was saying as well, is that when a survivor goes to court, they're forced to not only see their abuser for potentially the first time since the abuse happened, but they're also having to go on the stand and tell everybody what happened to them, especially during like preliminary exams, bench trials, jury trials, and that's very re-traumatizing. I mean, this is already violating to be sexually assaulted or assaulted by an intimate partner, and then to have to go onto a stand and tell a bunch of people that you've never met before. It's like you're getting assaulted all over again. And in response to having specific prosecuting attorneys who deal with domestic violence, there actually are some jurisdictions that do. There's one jurisdiction, that I've worked in, which is 23rd District Court, that does have a specific domestic violence and sexual assault prosecutor. But as far as I know, that's the only one that I'm aware of, but I definitely agree that there needs to be more.
Thank you, Marissa. All right, I believe this will be the last question. What can be done in regards to stiffer laws against people who lie about assault? A person should not be allowed to lie about assault to stop a person from leaving them or to make someone stay with them, or even because a person decides to walk away. So essentially, a person should not be allowed to lie about assault to gain whatever it is they want to. I am a survivor, and I do not think that those who lie should go unpunished because it hurts real victims. So the question is asking what can be done to change the law against people who lie about assault.
Well, there's a law in place for filing a false police report. It's a felony. So
You're confused. She's wanting to know what can happen when an accused.
I believe the question just like if someone is, I think Jasmine had the right idea where it's.
But I thought it was the other.
No,
Okay,
she's
no.
saying if someone lies about the assault happening, what
she's
what
actually survivor. I
can happen
understand.
to the person who lies?
Mm-hmm.
They can be charged with filing a false police report. That's a felony. I mean, obviously, it has to be proven, but that is an option to punish people and prevent people from lying about something like this.
It's like diluting the actual realization of what's going on. And most people don't file those type of lawsuits. The defendant just is like, I'm going to win, and wants to win, and they move on.
Well, you would have to report it to the police. It's a
It would have to
criminal
be
matter. So
reported.
you can go to the police and say that someone has filed these false charges. You're going to have to show some evidence. I think that it has to be more than just your word, unfortunately. But this is an option to report someone for filing a false police report.
Okay, that's interesting. So there are measures in place to
Mhm.
punish those. I also, tell me if you think this is accurate. The amount of people who lie about assault is very minimal in comparison to the amount of people who actually genuinely do go through assault. And I feel as if the media loves to portray, or people who are against this movement of discussing assault love to portray the fact that people lie about it and like to make it seem like a huge deal in order to minimize the true stories that exist. Do you also find that this is true?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
It's unfortunate. Because
Absolutely.
I mean, and from our experience, even when we defended the abusers, perpetrators, I'm doing what I can do for my client, but I still believe that my client did what the person was accused them of. So, you know, most of the times the victims are telling the truth from my personal experience in my cases that I've dealt with.
Or they hold back because obviously they're victims and they're used to, they've probably been abused many times, repeatedly, from a young age, in different circumstances. And finally, maybe it was a neighbor that called, it wasn't even them that called. Now, what happens is a lot of times victims will say, I don't want to press charges. They get nervous, they back out, or somebody else called. But then the state does pick up the case. Well, then the victim's like, I didn't want this, so now I'm not really going to cooperate, and they end up saying less than they were really.
And they may not even show up to court to testify, and it makes it much more difficult to get that conviction.
Yeah, the case gets dismissed usually.
Okay, I see.
There was a research study, and this is something that comes up a lot in prevention work for sure, too. And there was a research study that found that it was anywhere between 2 and 8%, which is even lower than some other crimes. And it's definitely not higher than other crimes having false report. Because a lot of times I get that question, especially from kids, you know, because they do hear this in the media a lot. And it, you know, it happens. All of these things happen. But what I like to ask them, you know, is that if they had, they had something wrong and they had to get a surgery, and they had 2 options, right, for surgery. And one of those options was going to give them a 92 to 98% chance of survival. And the other was going to give them a 2 to 8% chance of survival. Which one would they go with? The answer being very obvious, of course. And so that's how I approach that with them. And so, you know, folks are coming and saying, oh, well, people lie about this all the time. That's one tool I use to kind of challenge that and be like, I mean, it happens, but it happens so much less often than people are telling the truth. So I just wanted to mention that because I know that's something that people do bring up a lot. And sometimes that's really blown out of proportion in the media and in the way things are covered. So
I think that's a really interesting way to put it. And it helps sometimes to think of like different ways of thinking about it and using these analogies. So I just want to echo what Morgan, who is one of our speakers, just said in the chat. Another tool for responding to disclosures, as Kai also mentioned, the way you should respond, the 3 ways in which you should respond to people who tell you about their assault is learning from survivors. So L, listen actively. E, empower and support. A, ask. So ask what survivor needs and wants, not ask details about their experience if they're not ready to share that. R, respond. And N, nurture. So wants, needs change over time. So keeping that in mind as you respond to them. So that, I just have one quick question. I guess this is for lawyers. During an argument, is punching the door or walls considered an act of domestic violence, even when the person is not standing near the space?
I would say no. If the person is not near them, I would say no. However, the fact that someone does that can be used to show that they're aggressive, that they're violent, but the act in and of itself would not be considered an assault, because you wouldn't think that the person there's an imminent danger that you're going to get hit.
Yeah, it has to be like if they were standing
right next to
punch
you,
right there and they're right here, absolutely, or even here. But if the individual, the victim, is across the room and then somebody, you know, they just get angry and turn around and punch the opposite wall, no. I mean, you can sue them or file malicious destruction of property.
Yeah, that's another charge we see that goes hand in hand a lot of times with domestic violence. the person would also be charged with malicious destruction of property for destroying property in the midst of the
Because they probably threw something at them or did
I
that.
had a guy that cut up furniture, broke TVs, broke glasses, tore up the whole room. So
Yeah, so no, not quite, but usually if that's happening, there is probably an abuse occurring. And so as Jasmine said, that pictures of that and documentation of that can help support the actual abuse that probably to show that abuse really did happen. Because if that's happening, more likely than not, something else further is as well.
Okay, thank you for that. So it is almost the end of our event, and I will be sharing the names of the panelists and all of their titles within the chat in just a second. So I just want to say thank you so very much to all of our speakers tonight. I have spent years learning about sexual assault and domestic violence, but I truly feel like I gained so much new information and so many new perspectives from listening to you guys and learning about the cultural and legal and social factors which contribute to this overall concern of domestic violence and sexual assault. So truly, genuinely, thank you so much. And we did touch briefly on COVID and the ways in which it has exacerbated or like changed the scenarios for domestic violence and sexual assault. And I just want to say that coronavirus is a very real global issue. It's a real threat, and the measures that we have taken to control it are necessary. So we understand that we needed to take these measures in order to keep the safety and health of the general public, but we also understand that it's extremely unnecessary and extremely unfortunate and unacceptable that in the pursuit of this health that there are many people among us who have found themselves in the throes of violence. So I feel it's important when we discuss these issues to just keep in mind how many different ways that survivors can be impacted, their access to resources, the cultural barriers that make things difficult for them, just acknowledging that there's so much more to this assault than just the physical act of it. And that's also why we need to have this conversation. The time to have this conversation about sexual assault and about domestic violence is now. These issues are as real and as dangerous as any other threat in our society, and we have to be willing to listen to those who are affected by it, and we also have to be willing to come together with those who are working to eradicate it. So attending events such as these, being part of organizations such as Haven or First Step, or listening to Ladies in Law YouTube videos to educate yourself, any of these sorts of things which help you to contribute towards this, because if you truly genuinely care, then there's so many ways to work towards eradicating this issue. And lastly, thank you to everyone for taking the time to listen. Thank you for believing survivors. And if you are a survivor, I want you to know that your experience, your life, your voice is so cherished. So take back the night, take back control of your life, and know that you deserve to live as beautifully and fully as you can. So we're now going to be playing a video from Senator Debbie Stabenow, because as Professor Mueller mentioned in the beginning, we did receive endorsement from politicians. So we will be playing this video, and that will conclude Take Back the Night. So thank you so much to everyone for coming, and have a great night, everyone. Okay, this is taking a minute to set up. So 1 second. Also, I just want to reiterate once again that if anyone feels the need to join any of the psychological services that CAPS has provided, you are able to join that until 8/20. And I will once again link the Google form for submissions if anyone wants to anonymously submit any words of encouragement towards survivors, or to mention the ways in which this event has helped them. So I will be sending that, and then we will play the video once we figure out how to do that. Volume.
Event And thanks to Women in Learning and Leadership at the University of Michigan-Dearborn for organizing tonight's event. As we all know, this has been a very difficult year. Some studies have found that the stress of COVID-19 has contributed to an increased number of violent incidences in homes across Michigan. While sheltering in place might prevent COVID-19 transmission, staying home isn't safe when home isn't safe. That's why the work all of you are doing is so very important. And I've been honored to work on behalf of survivors, starting all the way back to when I was chair of the County Board of Commissioners and co-founded one of the first domestic violence shelters in Michigan. Since that time, we've all worked to change the culture from a time when domestic violence was seen as a private family issue or a woman's fault, to today, when our laws treat domestic violence as violence. Hearing the stories of survivors and witnessing their strength has strengthened my own resolve to keep working toward the day when everyone is treated with the respect and support they deserve. For those of you who are survivors, we stand with you. For those of you who are doing the critical work of helping survivors, thank you. And for everyone taking part in this vigil, thank you for being here and shining a bright light on domestic violence, because violence is violence, period. And we will continue our work until all families are truly safe.
So I think that concludes our evening, our event. Thank you all for coming. Yes, thank you. Hi. I cannot hear you.
Hi, Professor.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm so glad that you were able to pull this off.
You were amazing. This went, you're really great.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone else who was part of WIL and all the speakers for joining us tonight.
Yeah.
Wonderful job. Wonderful, wonderful job.
Thank you.
Should we stop? I should stop the recording, right? We don't want to.
Yeah, because it looks like people are still on, so I don't know what they actually can hear on the other side of this.
Stop recording. Okay, stop recording. Stop recording.